Hi everyone, my name is Laura Merritt and I am currently a special education teacher in Rome City Schools. I work with a wide range of grades. I work with third graders, fourth, fifth, and sixth graders. So this class has been very helpful for me, especially for my struggling readers because I even have them in the sixth grade. So it was good to be able to find some interventions and some ways to really help them. This case study also really helped me because it showed me things that I maybe shouldn't be doing and things that I should be doing, and it was working one-on-one really helped me to hone in on this kid's needs and try to help him as much as I could. So I first am going to introduce the kid I worked with. His name is Cameron, and he is an amazing little boy. He's smart, he's talented, and he actually receives gifted services. And that's it for that. So this is him. He loves basketball and football. He loves science. He did, however, tell me he did not like social studies. He likes dogs and cats. His favorite basketball player is LeBron James. His favorite books are the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, and one day he would love to go to California. Now, when I chose the book that we were going to read together, I wanted to choose something that I thought he might be interested in. So the book I chose was about animals because he loves dogs and cats, and he also has a dog and cat. The book I chose was The One and Only Ivan. And while it wasn't necessarily about dogs and cats, there was a dog in it, and it's mainly about a gorilla who is in the circus and an elephant who he becomes friends with, but unfortunately the elephant dies, and Ivan is left to take care of the elephant's baby. There is much more to the story. If you haven't read it, you definitely should. But I don't want to tell any more because I don't want to ruin it for anybody. So let's move on. We were given an assessment rubric, and also I found rubrics of my own. Here is the assessment rubric that was given to us by Dr. Griffin. For phonemic awareness, phonics, and fluency, these were definitely not an issue for Cameron. He flew through the phonics assessment, flew through the phonemic awareness assessment, and when I gave him the fluency assessment using the QRI-5, he was at the high end of normal. He read 112 correct words per minute. He did have 6 miscues, but he was still at the top end of normal because the normal range was from 54 to 112. So I was very pleased with these results. The areas of concern were comprehension and his writing skills. With comprehension, the main areas seem to be pulling detail from what he's read and inferencing. So I chose to focus on detail and inferencing for the reading comprehension. And for writing, he really struggled with a few things, but I just chose writing for detail, the main idea, and also, most importantly, mechanics, because this was an area that I saw he struggled in when he was doing his writing for me during the pretest. Okay, and right here, you will see the rubric I chose to use for his writing. It has topic, organization, paragraph, sentences, vocabulary, grammar, punctuation and case, spelling, and handwriting. And the main things I focused on here with this rubric, I did score him on everything, but the things I really focused on were the sentences, the grammar, the punctuation and case, spelling, and handwriting. Okay, so we're going to go on. Okay, so our the first strategy I used for my first goal was that Cameron will use the gradual release model to improve narrative writing. Some of you may be unfamiliar with this model, but you probably do it in the classroom. The gradual release model is simply, I do it, we do it together, and some people say that you do it as a group, and some people say you do it alone. But I personally like for students to do it as a group first, just because socialization is so important to students and kids can learn so well socially. So I always include the they do it aspect before going to you do it alone. So when I worked with him on the gradual release model, obviously he could not work with other kids because it was just him and I. But below at the bottom of here, right here, you can see a video of Cameron and I doing the We Do It portion where we were working on editing a paper that he was supposed to do for homework but never returned. Well, he returned it, but it was a little bit sloppy. So some of Cameron's weaknesses in writing were capitalization and punctuation. They weren't consistent. He might put a question mark when there needed to be a period. He might put a exclamation point when there should have been a question mark. So those were the things that I wanted to work on in terms of punctuation. And also, one thing that I did notice is that he was not aware of the difference between an apostrophe and a comma. Granted, they do look the same, but I would still want him to be able to differentiate between the two. So something else that I noticed that he did is when he wrote, some key words were missing from his sentences. I myself could understand what he was trying to say, but anyone else, another child reading it, might not be able to understand what he was trying to write. So when you have time, I'm not going to waste your time now having you watch this, but this is a video of him and I working on the gradual release model. This was during my video lesson where we were supposed to be doing something else, but he came back with his homework and it needed some editing, so we worked on that, and you can watch it. Okay, moving on. So the next one we used was inferencing will improve if the student can use their background knowledge. I can't stress how much I've learned that background knowledge is so important, and it's so hard for students if they don't have any background knowledge. I was fortunate enough with Cameron that he had been to a zoo before and seen gorillas. He'd seen elephants. He'd seen all types of animals, but while he was explaining to me what he had learned about animals at the zoo, it kind of clicked in my head and thought, well, some children might not have ever been to a zoo. So this was just something that I made a mental note of to try to be aware that not all students have the same background knowledge. And as teachers, we have to try to create background knowledge. So one day, Cameron did know about gorillas and giraffes and stuff, but during one of our lessons, we just looked at a bunch of gorillas and elephants, and we just really tried to think about what their lives were like in the wild, and if they were happy in the wild, if they were unhappy in the wild. We just really had a good conversation, and I think that this conversation kind of opened his mind up and gave him the opportunity to create a visual image in his mind about the one and only Ivan. So these are just pictures of gorillas in the wild versus Ivan, and elephants in the wild versus Ruby. So moving on. The next thing that I find so important for students is conferencing, because it helps them understand the story and make inferences based on details from the story. If they can talk and communicate and just have a discussion about a book, then it can really open up their eyes to so many different things. I think there is a big difference from having a child write a paper and having a genuine conversation. So I said that throughout our reading, we talked about what was going on in the story. Cameron shared his thoughts and I shared mine, and it kind of helped provide a level of comfort, and it allowed Cameron to become actively involved in our conversation. He really opened up to me. He talked about how he did not think it was fair that the gorillas were in cages. He wanted them to be free, and it was just really amazing that he was pulling all this information out of the story, which was my goal. I wanted him to be able to find details in the story, and eventually he was able to write a summary of what we had read. Unfortunately, we didn't finish the book, but eventually he was able to write a summary of what we had read, and it was filled with amazing details. So conferencing and inferencing and activating their background knowledge is so key in really getting them to create a genuine piece of writing, a genuine, amazing piece of writing. So there's that. And then next were the assessment results and recommendations. If you would like to see the post-test results, you can go back to the assessment section. He showed progress in every area. His fluency even went up, and I'm assuming this might have just been a fluke because it went from 112 to 119, so it might have been because it was a different article, but that went up. His comprehension went up. He was able to recall more details from the story we read. The story we read this time was called The Busy Beaver. So he did much better on all the assessments. So all in all, he made big improvements with his writing and punctuation and reading comprehension. So my recommendations for him were to read, and write. I know it sounds so simple, but I feel the more that a kid reads and the more that the kid writes, the more proficient he will be at it. So to make it less boring, I suggested that he continue to use the Post-its. In one of my lessons, we used Post-its, and he wrote the questions down. He wrote questions that he had about the story down, and he would put it in the story as he was reading it. This was so helpful for him because he didn't have to wait until he was at the end of the chapter to ask a question. He could write the question down right when he thought of it and put it in his book. And then also I recommended that he get a journal. He can write for 20 minutes a day. He can write about whatever he wants. And it's just a way for him to express himself and also get practice in writing. I also recommended that he read for 20 minutes a day and use the Post-its if needed to ask questions and to put ideas down so he can go back and look and maybe later on realize, hey, I answered that question on that Post-it. And lastly, I said that he should be reading with an adult as much as possible, or an older sibling, anybody who can conference with him and guide him and give him direction and just really help him infer things and what he reads. So those were my suggestions for him. And I also, last thing I suggested was for him to be challenged a little bit, because while he did struggle with a few things, I believe that he can do what he wants to do. So I suggested that once he became confident in his writing, he became confident in inferencing, and he became confident in pulling details out of a story to help him comprehend, that he tries to find a book with higher text complexity. So to really challenge him, but not to the frustration level, but just to really push him to be everything he can be. So that is the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I didn't ramble also, but these are my references, and thank you so much.